I realized how different it was. And it wasn't the dialogue, it was the stage direction.
That's the end of my contract.
I'm finishing out my contract, yeah.
Sir Patrick Stewart still remembers the chill that ran through him as the lights came up after the first private cut of Logan. He'd played Charles Xavier since the summer of 1999, yet that screening felt like stepping into a new, harsher universe, one where every scrape of metal and ragged breath told him the saga could never go back to neat heroics. When he turned to Hugh Jackman, both men were teary-eyed, but there was something else in Stewart's stare: panic. Something precious was ending, and he could already sense hands outside the room itching to tidy it all away. That instinct proved right the moment Disney swallowed 21st Century Fox. On paper it was
going to be a different kind of X-Men altogether. And finally I got a script. And I could see at once that we were in a different environment altogether.
A celebration of shared worlds. In reality, it was an audit. Executives combed through the mutant legacy, flagging anything that might clash with the glossy MCU vernacular. A weary professor in a rusty water tower, too bleak. An aging Wolverine coughing blood after a lifetime of violence, too final. The merger's buzzwords were synergy and accessibility, code for sanding off rough edges, until everything fit the same lunchbox. Stewart tried to be diplomatic, but the mask slipped in one interview when he admitted the original script pages for Logan felt like finding a pulse in a genre that had gone numb. The film's R rating, its hard swerves into grief and failure, had convinced him to return one last time. Disney, however, was already whispering that nobody stays dead in superhero stories, especially not valuable trademarks. Offers began trickling in: a cameo here, a multiverse joke there.
I'm very protective, and you might even say sentimental about Logan.
Each pitch carried the same subtext: come back, wave, exit through the gift shop. Stewart declined with polite exhaustion. He wasn't alone. Jennifer Lawrence, the blue-skinned face of the prequel era, had once carried entire marketing campaigns on her shoulders. By the time Dark Phoenix arrived, her screen time had been reduced to single-digit minutes. Mystique dispatched before the second act like a casualty of accounting.
I feel like I'm on a part-time movie.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I haven't worked an entire week on this whole movie.
During a late-night talk show stop, she laughed it off. I feel like I'm on a part-time movie, but backstage crew said the joke hid genuine resentment. Lawrence had signed on to explore identity and rebellion. Instead, the studio's new marching orders were streamlined and fresh. Disney wanted newer, cheaper mutants, ones who didn't come with back-end deals or opinions about narrative integrity. Michael Fassbender felt the shift. Magneto's pain had once anchored entire plots, his Auschwitz tattoo a permanent reminder that these films tackled trauma rather than tiptoed around it. After the merger, early outlines for a rebooted script arrived on Fassbender's desk.
There's new cast members. What was it like meeting those new cast members? Did you give them tips?
I haven't met them. I haven't had any scenes with them.
The Holocaust origin was gone, replaced by a modern tragedy that could be explained in a 2-minute montage. He politely passed, telling friends he wouldn't sign on to play an emoji of the man. Even Hugh Jackman, whose berserker charisma had turned a B-list comic character into a global icon, couldn't escape the corporate gravity. Ryan Reynolds phoned him daily, promising that Deadpool and Wolverine would respect Logan's ending. Disney's first draft, however, treated Wolverine as a fish-out-of-water gag from an alternate timeline. Jackman pushed back hard. If he returned, the scars had to stay real. If you are enjoying the drama so far, please like and subscribe before we dive deeper. Thanks. Now back to the video. Back-channel emails reveal weeks of tug-of-war before Marvel finally conceded. Jackman signed, but only after inserting clauses that barred cheap resurrections down the line. While stars negotiated, fans began to notice something else. The older X-Men movies were quietly disappearing from promotional reels and recommended lists on Disney+. In some regions, Days of Future Past could no longer be found without a manual search. It was as if the studio hoped collective memory would fade, clearing space for a reboot unburdened by grit, politics, or mid-2000s leather. #NotMyXmen trended for days, but the corporate timeline marched on. Inside Marvel's Burbank offices, a whiteboard labeled Mutant Wave mapped out the future: a Gen Z Charles with viral-ready optimism, a Magneto whose motivations sidestepped real-world atrocities, cameo slots reserved for legacy actors willing to grin for 10 seconds and vanish. Brand consistency over emotional continuity. Synergy over subtext. The plan was clean, market-tested, and utterly hollow to the people who had carried the flame for 20 years. That hollowness finally pushed Stewart to speak bluntly at a London Q. He praised Logan as the epitaph the character deserved, then added almost under his breath, "I don't believe you can resurrect meaning without cheapening it." The room fell silent, Headlines, and somewhere in a Disney boardroom, a PR manager scribbled legacy actors becoming liability in red ink. The board's immediate fix was textbook damage control. Release a glossy sizzle reel teasing mutants for a new age, sprinkle in half a second of yellow spandex, and drown the internet in think pieces about optimism returning to the brand. Instead of calming the storm, it fanned it. TikTok edits juxtaposed the reel's pastel cheer with clips of Logan weeping over Charles's grave. One video alone racked up 30 million views in 2 days. The caption reading, "From pain to pop music. This is what happens when accountants write epilogues." Privately, Disney's casting division accelerated auditions for a teenage Cyclops and a 19-year-old Storm. Self-tape instructions leaked. Applicants were told to avoid political subtext and deliver lines with TikTokable energy. When the pages surfaced on Reddit, the backlash was instantaneous. Longtime comic writers weighed in, reminding followers that the X-Men were born from civil rights allegory, not influencer charm. Hashtags morphed into pledges to boycott future films if the legacy actors were reduced to Easter eggs. Conventional press outlets joined the pile-on. Variety ran a sober headline, "Can Marvel afford to alienate the generation that built it?" that reportedly reached Bob Iger's desk before breakfast. While executives scrambled, the actors, finally realizing they held more moral currency than the studio, started coordinating. Fassbender, Lawrence, Stewart, and Jackman hadn't shared a group call in years. Now they spent an hour on Zoom hashing out a unified response. Lawyers begged them to be cautious, but the mood was defiant. Rather than issue a legalistic statement, they opted for symbolism. Stewart posted an old behind-the-scenes still, the 2000 cast in battered prosthetics, a single caption beneath, "Remember what this was about." Within an hour, Jackman retweeted with the claws emoji and the number 23, a nod to the chromosome that marks mutants in the comic. Fans understood instantly. Legacy would not go quietly. Marvel brass blamed internet misinterpretation, yet the brand damage was done. Focus group tracking for the upcoming reboot plummeted as older viewers reported feeling disrespect. Investor calls grew tense. One analyst asked whether diluting the franchise's social edge might hurt long-term revenue. Kevin Feige, normally unflappable, offered a rehearsed answer about balancing heritage and freshness, but a slip of the tongue betrayed the strain. He called the original run those vintage movies as if they were curios on a shelf. Twitter lit up. Vintage. They paid your salary. Amid that chaos, a different Disney controversy reignited, this one orbiting Chris Evans and Pixar's Lightyear. The 2022 film had seemed an easy win. Familiar IP, a star proven at the box office, and the stamp of Pixar craftsmanship. Instead, it became a global flashpoint. A 10-second kiss in a life montage between Commander Hawthorne and her wife triggered bans across 14 countries and a torrent of culture war outrage at home. Evans, never known for cautious phrasing, gave Reuters a quote that sliced straight through the noise. "The real truth is those people are idiots." Overnight, the marketing campaign turned into a battleground. Evangelical groups called for boycotts. Progressive fans bought extra tickets in solidarity. By opening weekend, Lightyear was no longer a family adventure. It was a referendum. Inside Disney, the fallout felt eerily similar to the mutant crisis, legacy versus liability. Pixar animators revealed that the kiss had first been excised, then restored only after staff circulated an open letter accusing corporate leaders of quiet censorship. Disney capitulated, but the damage to morale lingered. When the film underperformed $26 million worldwide on a budget north of $300 million, commentators on the right crowed, "Go woke, go." Executives responded by sidelining sequel talk and quietly shelving a Buzz-adjacent series, infuriating the creative team that had fought for representation in the first place. Evans refused to retreat. On a late-night segment, he contextualized the uproar as a blip on the timeline of social progress. Those stuck in the old playbook eventually age out. We just keep marching forward. The dinosaur metaphor went viral. Supporters hailed him as fearless. Detractors blasted him as arrogant. Either way, Disney now found itself juggling two separate PR bonfires, both sparked by the same spark artists who valued meaning over market calculus. Legal departments advised radio silence. PR crafted talking points about listening to all audiences, yet the contradictions kept piling up. Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay bill had already placed the company under a microscope. Now conservative politicians weaponized Lightyear as proof of Disney's radical agenda, while progressive employees circulated evidence of years-long studio resistance to queer visibility. Trying to please everyone, Disney pleased no one, and the cracks that had opened with the mutants widened into a fault line running straight through the Magic Kingdom. The next rupture came from an unexpected quarter. Cybersecurity. A recently dismissed IT technician, still bitter over layoffs tied to streaming losses, hacked the park-wide menu system, altering allergy information, jacking up prices and inserting QR codes that redirected guests to political screed. The digital vandalism was contained before anyone suffered harm, but court filings revealed the breach cost nearly $750,000 to fix. Headlines mocked Disney's vaunted tech prowess, comparing the hack to a fairy tale castle built on sand. By mid-2025, the corporation's once impenetrable image looked moth-eaten. Theme park scandals about disability access service fraud painted Disney as either heartless or incompetent. Right-wing commentators whipped up outrage over a black Ariel and a Latina Snow White. Left-wing critics decried mass layoffs juxtaposed with Bob Iger's $31 million compensation packet. And through it all, the artists whose work had defined entire childhoods began to align publicly against the homogenization machine. Hugh Jackman summed it up in a podcast recorded just after a grueling Deadpool night shoot. Asked if he worried that redonning the claws would cheapen Logan, he paused, voice rough from shouting over explosions. Cheapening happens when the people upstairs forget why these stories mattered in the first place. My job is to remember even if they don't. Those words ricocheted across fan spaces as both rallying cry and indictment. In the old days, Disney would have soothed the uproar with a teaser trailer and a catchy pop track. But the mood had shifted. Audiences were no longer starstruck, they were and the actors, once contractually muzzled, had tasted the power of collective memory. They had nothing left to lose except the stories themselves. By late summer, the standoff hit the shareholders' meeting. Usually a scripted celebration, suddenly a minefield. Questions from the floor veered away from quarterly earnings to ask why exactly the studio was rewriting Magneto's origin to avoid controversy. Iger tried to pivot, praising inclusive, forward-looking storytelling, but a retired teacher stood up waving a battered 1982 comic. Forward-looking? She snapped. This book taught my students about the Holocaust. Why are you erasing it now? The room broke into spontaneous applause. Security tried unsuccessfully to quiet her down before the moment went viral. That clip reached Eric Lenscher himself. Fassbender retweeted it with a single word: respect. 10 minutes later, Ian McKellen quote-tweeted seconded. Overnight, respect, the source, trended across 12 countries, eclipsing Disney's own marketing tags. The optics were brutal. 2 generations of Magneto united against the company that owned the character's copyright. With pressure mounting, Marvel's story architects held an emergency off-site summit in Burbank. An internal memo leaked. The marching order was to find legacy-honoring workarounds that wouldn't compromise the new PG. One suggestion: present Magneto as a survivor of an unnamed genocide. Another: shift his trauma to a fictional civil war, avoiding real historical baggage. When those pages leaked to the writer's Slack, at least 3 staffers threatened to quit, 2 actually walked. Meanwhile, the Deadpool set, supposed to be Disney's olive branch to skeptics, was turning into its own PR headache.
However, another notion has came up only earlier today, and that was Deadpool.
Jackman's insistence on stunt realism clashed with corporate safety reps. Reynolds pushed for metagags mocking Disney's secrecy, only to be reined in by brand protection lawyers. Between takes, Jackman recorded a charity PSA about men's mental health. The line he ad-libbed, "Even heroes need space to grieve," struck fans as a thinly veiled plea for Logan's arc to remain sacred. Disney trimmed the spot before release, cutting that sentence. Back at Pixar, animators still smarting from the Lightyear fallout discovered that a planned short featuring Hawthorne's family had been mothballed. The official explanation: creative realignment. Unofficially, marketing didn't want more controversy while the parks were under legislative scrutiny. Story leads drafted a resignation letter citing a corporate allergy to authenticity. It circulated internally with dozens of digital signatures before HR offered hush-money packages and ironclad NDAs to keep it from the trades. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Any storyline anchored in painful reality, mutant persecution, queer love, historical atrocity, was being sanded down until it posed no risk to merchandise revenue. What remained were calorie-free crossovers designed for clip compilations and ride queue. A former Imagineer summed it up anonymously to the LA Times. They don't want myth. They want background noise for gift shops. Fans rebelled with the only leverage they had. A coordinated campaign encouraged canceling Disney Plus for 1 month, timing the blackout with the fiscal quarter close. Analysts projected a negligible impact, yet Wall Street notices any downward blip. Disney's stock dipped 3% the week cancellations began. CFO Hugh Johnston fielded analyst concerns by promising robust growth from synergistic IP deployment, business speak that only fueled more memes comparing synergy charts to Hydra propaganda posters. Inside Marvel, junior screenwriters started an encrypted group chat nicknamed School for Gifted Scribes. They swapped links to banned courtroom testimonies, queer-coded scenes cut from rough drafts, and the infamous menu hack indictment as proof the Empire wasn't invincible. One bold proposal emerged: leak an early draft of the reboot that kept Magneto's Holocaust survivor roots intact, daring Disney to explain why it was discarded. Legal risk was high, but morale was so low it felt worth it. On a drizzly November night, that draft hit the internet. PDF pages watermarked property of Marvel Studios destroy after Redding splashed across fan forums. Within hours, historians, activists, and Jewish advocacy groups hailed it as essential. Editors at The Atlantic and Rolling Stone penned op-eds praising the nuance Disney had taught. Facing a moral outcry far louder than before, executives convened yet another closed-door meeting. Options ranged from retrenching, stay the course, the noise will fade, to ditching the sanitized rewrite altogether. No decision surfaced, but insiders whispered that Kevin Feige left the room looking ashen. The following week, Stewart, Jackman, McKellen, and Lawrence recorded a joint podcast interview, something their contracts once forbade. They didn't bash Disney by name, but each spoke about the responsibility artists have when corporations forget the point of stories. Lawrence invoked Mystique's central question: if you're born different, do you conform or fight? Jackman added, sometimes the fight is just telling the truth. Millions streamed the episode. Disney's legal team debated litigation, then backed down, unwilling to be seen muzzling beloved icon. All the while, new scandals kept the company off balance: a cocaine bust at Magic Kingdom, a fire in Epcot's France pavilion, fresh accusations of disability access pass abuse. Commentators tied every mishap to a single narrative: a titan stretched too thin, chasing quarterly gains at the expense of soul. That December, a surprise guest walked onto Saturday Night Live, Chris Evans. In the monologue, he ditched scripted jokes halfway through and spoke directly to camera. For a place built on imagination, he said, you'd think there'd be more room for the imaginations that got us here in the first place. The audience roared. Backstage, NBC censors debated cutting the line from re-airings but relented after social media erupted with praise. Disney could no longer spin this as isolated grumbling. Their own stars, their own brand ambassadors, were calling out the Emperor's new clothes on live television. Stockholders demanded a coherent strategy by the next earnings call. Insiders say Bob Iger floated stepping back from day-to-day creative greenlighting, hinting at a cultural advisory board that would include legacy talent. Whether that materializes is anyone's guess. But one truth now seems unbreakable: the people who carry the stories remember why they matter even when the company that owns them forgets. An audience, they've been reminded that the greatest power any fan wields isn't a streaming subscription or a theme park ticket, it's memory. Memory that refuses to be rebranded, rebooted, or quietly retired. Memory that keeps the real X-Men alive, claws extended, ready to fight for meaning long after the merchandise is outdated. The shockwaves reached Burbank long before January's quarterly call. For once, the lobby wasn't lined with tourists taking selfies under the sorcerer's hat. Instead, picketers circled the fountain holding cardboard placards that read "Stories over Synergy" and "Stop Franken-franchising our heroes." Most weren't union members, just fans who had booked refundable flights after the PDF leak and decided to make their anger tactile. A few wore yellow hoverchair cosplay, a silent reminder of the cameo that set the fuse. Inside the auditorium, Bob Iger stepped to the podium behind a slide titled Mutant Roadmap. It showed nothing but vague arrows pointing toward phase integration. He began reciting subscriber metrics, yet phones lit up across the room. Somebody live-streamed Patrick Stewart joining the protesters outside, linking arms with a teenage cosplayer dressed as classic Cyclops. The feed jumped to 200,000 viewers in minutes. When a shareholder asked why the chart still lacked confirmed writers or directors, Iger's answer, "Creative conversations are ongoing," was drowned out by the livestream chat spamming "Listen to Patrick." That public embarrassment forced a pivot. Within 48 hours, Marvel's Story Group received new marching orders: restore Magneto's Holocaust backstory, draft a limited series Bible centered on refugee camps, and invite Holocaust scholars as consultants. An internal email warned the optics of erasure are untenable. Yet the same memo demanded the show remain TV-14 and maintain cross-demographic merchandise viability. Writers nicknamed the project Schrodinger's genocide, both present and not present, depending on the viewer's age and the aisle of Target. The contradictions spilled into Deadpool's cutting room. Editors were told to keep Jackman's blood-spattered final set piece intact for theatrical release. then create a slightly milder Disney Plus version for day-and-date streaming in select territories. Reynolds ball. He counter-offered an R-rated streaming cut and a PG-13 theatrical version, exactly the inverse. Legal called that proposal operationally non-compliant. Jackman sent a single-sentence email to the exec chain. If Logan's sacrifice is optional content, I'm optional too. Production paused for 2 days until an agreement, one global cut, no alternate edits, digital disclaimers be damned. Meanwhile, the hacked draft continued spreading like samizdat. High school teachers added scenes to lesson plans on propaganda. Graduate film seminars dissected it alongside Blade Runner and early Kubrick as an example of studio anxiety. Every download was another reminder Disney couldn't shove the genie back in the bottle. Hollywood talent agencies capitalized. CAA and WME began pitching legacy sincerity clauses, stipulating studios must consult original performers when rebooting major roles. Lionsgate snatched the idea first, announcing it had brought back Keanu Reeves as an executive producer on a planned Speed sequel to protect tonal authenticity. Deadline's headlines: Studio learns from Disney's misstep trended all weekend. Disney answered not with press releases but with checks. Stewart and McKellen were quietly offered executive producer credits on the newly revived Magneto series. Producer points sweetened the pot. Stewart's agent asked for script approval on any Xavier cameo. Legal tried inserting a clause barring the actor from public commentary that may disparage or diminish the company's goodwill. Stewart crossed it out in red pen and wrote, "Truth diminishes nothing worth keeping." Jennifer Lawrence watched all this from afar while shooting a mid-budget courtroom thriller in New Orleans. Reporters camped outside base camp hoping for a comment. She finally obliged between takes. No sarcasm this time, just exhaustion. "I spent 10 years trying to make Mystique human. If they use her again, I hope they remember that's the point." The quote ran on Variety's front page. Within days, insiders confirmed the reboot screenplay had reinstated Raven's search for self, shelving the earlier pitch of Team Hacker in a shiny stealth suit. But each concession triggered new battles. Consumer products brass worried that a Holocaust arc and shape-shifting identity crisis wouldn't translate to plush dolls. They floated delaying the series until after the next fiscal year. Kevin Feige, sensing a new PR nightmare, threatened to take the project off the slate entirely rather than gut it again. Investors panicked, stock wobbled, and a compromise emerged. A special edition toy line sold through charitable partnerships, proceeds to refugee NGO. Merchandising grudgingly agreed they could write off philanthropy as brand rehab. While executives wrangled spreadsheets, creatives found loopholes. A team of young FX artists built rogue animatics, illustrating Cyclops rescuing asylum seekers at the Mexican border, framing mutant discrimination through present-day injustice. The sequence wasn't in any official script, but when they screened it for Feige, he greenlit previs for exploration. Word leaked, conservative commentators blasted woke X-Men, and the animatic landed on Last Week Tonight, where John Oliver mocked Disney's indecision. Are they freedom fighters or Happy Meal figurines? Pick a lane, Mickey. Pressure mounted for a definitive stand. That's when Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds staged their masterstroke. Weeks before Deadpool wrapped, they recorded a guerrilla PSA on a green screen set. The video opened with Deadpool and Wolverine bickering about time travel, then dropped the bit. Jackman turned solemn, "Stories shape, when they lose their scars we lose the map." Reynolds added, "Protect the messy parts. They're the only reasons these characters ever mattered." Disney's social team begged to cut it. The actors leaked it themselves. It racked up 40 million views in a day and became the most shared clip either star had ever posted. Suddenly the revolt felt unstoppable. Shareholder advisory firms warned that continued perception of brand sterilization could depress theme park attendance among older demographics. Analysts coined a new metric, emotional canon equity, and calculated that every percentage point drop in ECE risked tens of millions in ancillary revenue. Disney realized it wasn't just losing goodwill, it was leaving money on the table. So the company did something uncharacteristic. It blamed. In a memo signed by Iger and Feige, Disney committed to a heritage stewardship initiative. Key promises: historical authenticity for Magneto, advisory panels featuring former cast, and a moratorium on multiverse cameos that undermine pre-existing finales without substantive narrative justification. In plainer speech, no more cheap deaths, no more hollow resurrections, no more jokes that erase someone's last scene. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that stories can't be optimized solely by algorithm. When the memo leaked, Stewart tweeted a simple thumbs up. McKellen followed with a Shakespeare quote, "The wheel has come full circle." Fastbender posted a broken chain emoji, and Lawrence? She replied to all three with a blue scale selfie captioned, "Still here." Disney's empire won't crumble overnight, but the ground has shifted. Actors and fans discovered their leverage. Executives discovered their limits, and somewhere in a writer's room newly stacked with historians, poets and yes, actual mutants from the old guard, a fresh script begins with Eric Lenscher staring at the ruins of history, scars intact, soul unsanitized, ready to fight again.